Shortly after 6:30 a.m. on the 6th of June 1944, along this stretch of sand, men of the US 1st Infantry Division emerged from their landing craft into a hail of gunfire, which in just minutes had killed or wounded hundreds. Over the next few hours, many more would fall, as men found themselves trapped on the beach under murderous machine gun fire. The only thing standing in the way of catastrophe that morning was the courage of small groups of soldiers who braved the storm of bullets to breach the defences of the Atlantic Wall. In this video, we'll blend the latest technology, actual footage from that day, and testimony of those who were there to follow in the footsteps of the men of one landing craft on that one day who were amongst the very first to unlock Omaha Beach. When finally it was decided in early 1944 exactly where to make the long-awaited Allied assault into northwest Europe, it was clear to all that it would be far from easy. Let's find out why. The actual location chosen to land on D-Day was here, in the Normandy region of France. Split across 5 main invasion beaches, British troops of the 3rd Infantry Division would come ashore on Sword Beach. Next to them, Canadian forces would land at Juno. To their west, the British 50th Division would land on the beach codenamed Gold, and on the Cotentin Peninsula, US forces would arrive on Utah Beach. Between them lay one final location, to be assaulted by American troops of the 1st and 29th Infantry Divisions, Omaha Beach. Omaha itself was in truth very different from the other beaches. At 3.7 miles long, it was and is a picturesque crescent of golden sands. But what makes it unique, and in fact a nightmare to assault, is this: a continual line of high ground or bluffs running along its length just beyond the beach. Rising to a height of some 100 feet, it wasn't insurmountable, but from a defender's perspective, it offered unobstructed views of the entire approach, great opportunities to dig in and create defences, and forced any attacker to fight uphill in order to take them. If there was a weak point to this location, and that in itself is arguable, it's these: a series of 5 natural inlets in the form of valleys running from the beach inland to eventually meet this main road set back from the coast. These inlets, known as draws, had been identified by the Allies as the key to unlocking Omaha. Not only did they offer a route inland that did not require scaling those bluffs, but crucially, they were the only path armour and vehicles could take to get off the beach. The problem was that the Germans knew that too. In fact, their entire defensive network in this area, and it was an impressive one, was based on that very premise. This stretch of the Atlantic Wall, like all others, was made up of a series of strongpoints known as Widerstand or resistance nests. These WNs comprised a range of defensive structures from concrete pillboxes and rifle positions holding a single man to large casemates concealing anti-tank guns and everything in between. Each WN was strategically sited to offer mutual support and to overlook one of the key draws off the beach. In this area, there were 15 different positions, linked by trenches running along the line of bluffs, manned by approximately 1,000 men with over 80 machine guns, 18 anti-tank guns, and at least 9 mortar positions. A very tough nut to crack. But cracked it had to be, and when Allied planners had begun looking in detail at Omaha, they, like with all other beaches, had broken them down into individual sectors. In the west, where the Rangers and the men of the 29th Infantry Division were to come ashore, were Charlie, Dog Green, White and Red sectors, and Easy Green, and to the eastern half of the beach were Easy Red and Fox Green. These 2 sectors were to be assaulted by men of the highly regarded US 1st Infantry Division, the Big Red 1. It is on those men, and specifically Easy Red sector, where our focus will lie. So what about those doing the attacking? Well, for this video, we'll focus on just 32 men who came ashore together in an LCVP or Higgins boat in the first wave that morning. They were these guys, men of E Company 16th Infantry Regiment, under the command of 29-year-old 2nd Lieutenant John Spaulding. By turning to the vast records archive available at Findmypast, we learn that John Martin Spaulding was born on the 17th of December 1914 in the state of Indiana to a working-class family. His father Hugh was in the US National Census for 1930, noted as a cooper by trade, working in a tobacco factory in Owensboro, Kentucky, where John and his 4 siblings were raised. A further record for February 1941 tells us that John had actually enlisted in the army at Louisville, Kentucky, before the outbreak of war as a private soldier, later being commissioned as a second lieutenant in the 1st Infantry Division, which is exactly where he found himself on the eve of D-Day. Yet to see combat, he was nevertheless keen to do his bit. Alongside him in his boat section and acting as his deputy section leader was Technical Sergeant Philip "Phil" Streisig. Despite being 4 years younger than Spaulding, Streisig, a New Jersey native of Polish heritage, was vastly experienced. Having been drafted in 1940, he had already seen service in Tunisia and Sicily, where he had earned no less than 3 Silver Stars for gallantry and a reputation as a courageous and resourceful soldier. His leadership qualities had seen him quickly rise to Technical Sergeant. Known to be sharp-minded and sharp-tongued, he was said to have scared young GIs as much as the enemy. But when it came to a fight, no one doubted Streisig's abilities. Also in the section were these men, including Sergeants Colwell, Colson and Biscoe, along with 20-year-old Brooklyn native Vincent "Vinny" DiGiorno, who had the ominous duty of carrying the section's flamethrower. And so it was, these 32 men, along with the remainder of E Company's 16th Infantry Regiment, who were given the job of prizing open the defences of Hitler's Atlantic Wall on this part of Easy Red. Their job, quite simply, was to land in this area, advance up the E1 draw into Saint-Laurent-sur-Mer, neutralising the enemy defences along the way, including right here at WN64. In doing so, they would unlock one half of the E1 draw, allowing the follow-on waves to push up the LaRouque Valley and outflank the remaining defences on Omaha. At least that was the idea. This aerial image offers a harrowing glimpse into that one famous moment in history, but also allows us to explore the area as it looked at the time. In the Easy Red sector, we can clearly identify the location of German defences, including WN64, which was in fact still under construction on D-Day. Perhaps most important is this area, the remains of a knocked-down house known on Allied maps as the Roman Ruins. This was a key orientation point on Easy Red, and its actual location can still be identified today by this concrete block, which was present in 1944 and shows us exactly where the ruins, long since gone, were once located. This will be the area in which Spaulding's, and so our story, will unfold. To tell that story, we have the benefit of Spaulding's own words and recollections from that momentous day. By 6:30 AM on the 6th of June, his craft, filled with terrified, spray-soaked and almost entirely seasick men, found itself heading for the shore as part of the first wave on Omaha Beach.
When we got 200 yards offshore, the boat halted, and a member of the Navy crew yelled for us to drop the ramp. Sergeant Fred Biscoe and I kicked the ramp down. Shortly before this, a Navy man had mounted the machine gun on the rear of the LCVP and started to return fire. We were now receiving not only machine gun, but also mortar and artillery fire. We'd come in at low tide, and the obstacles were noticeable. As we left the boat, we spread out in a V formation, about 30 yards across. There was soon a noticeable decline of sand beneath our feet, and we were soon over our heads, so we tried to swim. Sergeant Streisig and the medic, Private George Bowen, were carrying an 18-foot ladder which was to be used for crossing the anti-tank ditch or for any purpose which might arise. They were struggling with it in the water, just about time that I was having my worst trouble afloat. As the ladder came by me, I grabbed it. Streisig yelled and said, "Lieutenant, we don't need any help." But hell, I was busy trying to get help, not to give it.
What Spaulding and his men had very quickly found was that rather than landing directly on the beach, they had in fact hit a sandbar and had to cross several deep pools, almost fatally, before even reaching the shore. Now cold, thoroughly waterlogged, and still hundreds of yards from the dubious safety at the base of the bluffs in this area, they had to make their way as best they could towards their objective. Their saving grace was in many ways a tragic one. The fire they took was less than they might have expected, for several reasons. First, they had landed in front of a relative weak spot between WN62 and WN64 in a lightly defended part of the beach. Sadly, the other reason was that the rest of E Company and most of the 16th had not. Drifting to their left on their run-in, they'd landed directly into the mouth of WN62, one of the most formidable defensive positions on Omaha. The result was the gunners in that position had plenty of easier targets much closer by, and the destruction they wrought in just a few minutes on the rest of E Company in the 16th was horrific. For Spaulding and his men, the advance across the beach was still no easy task. In navigating the beach obstacles, they had to avoid mines, mortar, and plenty of small arms fire, pressing on as fast as their heavy equipment and waterlogged clothes would allow. It was during this time Privates Roper and Tilley were both hit, but thankfully no one killed. That changed just a few moments later, when reaching this area around the Roman ruins, Sergeant Raimundo, seeing the beleaguered E Company men under WN62 several hundred yards to his left, began moving in that direction, only to be hit and killed by a sniper from the bluffs above. It was here, sheltering below the bluffs of Omaha Beach, that finally Spaulding's men were able to return fire, targeting lone riflemen and several concealed machine gun positions to their left. For those less fortunate, like PFC Digitano, he was told to head back onto the beach to retrieve the flamethrower pack that had done its best to drown him on the way to shore. It was now that Spaulding, with the vastly experienced Streisig, took stock. Clearly they were alone, though in something of a dead spot and with a small natural gully to their front, and it seemed that they were faring better than their comrades further down the beach. So there was only one choice: push on, scale the bluffs, and silence those guns. In order to do that, first a section of barbed wire to their front had to be breached with the Bangalore torpedo, which was accomplished by Staff Sergeant Colwell, eventually opening up a path right here to climb the bluffs. With Streisig in the lead and using all his experience to avoid the hundreds of mines sown into the slopes, they began to advance along this track, possibly passing a fortunately silent German machine gun position, all the while using the many dips and depressions for cover from small arms fire as they did so. It was by now about 7:30. Advancing painfully slowly against ever heavier small arms fire and with the constant risk of tripping mines beneath their feet, the men of E Company, as always led by Streisig, advanced yard by yard up the bluffs. Over the next hour, that advance continued with the commands strung out and the leading elements probing the enemy line, occasionally engaging small groups of enemy soldiers in a truly nerve-wracking experience. For the E Company men, there was one particular position, manned by a lone machine gunner just short of the crest to their front, which was proving decidedly problematic. Here's Spaulding again.
I couldn't take my eye off the machine gun above us, so Sergeant Biscoe kept saying, "Lieutenant, watch out for the damn mines." They were little box-type mine, and it seems that the place was infested with them. The Lord was with us, and we had an angel on each shoulder on that trip. Trying to get the machine above us, Sergeant Blades fired his bazooka and missed. He was shot in the left arm almost immediately. Private First Class Curley was shot down next. Sergeant Phelps moved into position to fire and was shot in both legs. By this time, practically all my section had moved up. We decided to rush the machine gun about 15 yards away. As we rushed it, the lone German operating the gun threw up his hands and yelled, "Kamerad!" We would have killed him, but we needed prisoners for interrogation, so I ordered the men not to shoot him. He was Polish.
Records tell us that the Polish-speaking Sergeant Streisig, after sharing some choice words with the Polish prisoner who had so stubbornly manned his gun and was lucky to survive the encounter, continued to advance towards the top of the bluffs, whilst the wounded were left behind in the care of Private Bowen, the section medic. For the rest, the advance continued, this time with Sergeant Clarence Colson in the lead, firing the wounded Private Tilley's BAR from the hip as he did so. He was amongst the very first men to reach the summit of the bluffs a few minutes later to find a well-made trench running along the crest with a pillbox firing down on the rest of the section at its far end. Colson himself recalled what happened next.
This pillbox was the one that was holding the company up. Now I could use a trench to come right down the back end. Maybe they heard me shoot the guy in the trench, but they couldn't see me. The pillbox had a door that goes downstairs, and you have your gunner slot, see? So I got the BAR. It had a bipod on it, and I got it set up right. Opened the door and started spraying. All of a sudden, the white flag came out, and I quit firing. A bunch of Germans came out. I motioned for them to come on up. I don't know how many more was dead in there, but it was a good thing to stop these guys. Without that pillbox, the beach just got a whole lot safer.
Finally, after a grueling and exhausting assault through the horrors of Omaha Beach, there was a glimmer of hope. Despite the carnage unfolding on either side of them, some men had breached the enemy line, were on top of the bluffs, and finally there was a route inland. Exact records are unclear, but it's likely that shortly after Clarence Colson silenced that machine gun, men of G Company, 16th Infantry Regiment under Captain Joe Dawson, who had landed 20 minutes behind Spaulding's group and also made the ascent, made contact. In a hurried discussion, it was decided that Dawson's group would turn left to assault towards Colville-sur-Mer, while Spaulding's would turn right and continue to attack towards WN64. Over the next few hours, they would do exactly that. For both groups, there was still plenty more fighting to come as they advanced from hedgerow to hedgerow with rifles and grenades, and more men would pay the ultimate price. But the seemingly impossible had been achieved, and Omaha Beach was open. The remarkable accomplishments of Spaulding, Streisig, Dawson, and all the men of the 16th that day were not unique. Further down the beach, other men too had found gaps, and little by little, those still trapped under the guns of the WNs had begun to move, and by the end of the day, a small but vital toehold on this part of Fortress Europe had been achieved. This photograph, a frozen moment in time from that infamous day, provides just a little hint at the importance of what exactly those men had achieved. All across Omaha, at the shingle, by abandoned landing craft, and all across the beach itself, more than 3,000 men lay dead, dying, and wounded. Had it not been for the actions of those who went above and beyond that day, the toll may have been far, far worse. For the 32 men of Lieutenant Spaulding's section, perhaps the very first to scale the bluffs, there had been mixed fortunes. Only 2 men, Sergeants Raimundo and Bisco, would pay with their lives. A further 8 more would be wounded. And 7 men, including Spaulding, Streisig, Coulson and the medic Bowen, would earn the Distinguished Service Cross. Others still got a marble one. Several of the section to survive that day would not survive the war, falling in the many bitter battles to come. 2 men that did live, only to meet with tragedy, were Spaulding and Streisig. The lieutenant, who had suffered severe battle fatigue later in the war, eventually went home to Kentucky, became a state legislator, remarried and had 3 more children, living a seemingly ideal life. But this powerful newspaper article, which appeared in the Owensboro Inquirer on the 6th of November 1959, tells of a tragic end to the life of a man who had achieved so much. Technical Sergeant Streisig, that legendary soldier within the 1st Infantry Division, would eventually go home to New Jersey, marry and have 4 children. But the horrors he witnessed in more than 440 days of combat from North Africa to the Hurtgen Forest would never leave him. Racked with PTSD and suffering physical pain from wartime wounds, Philip Streisig took his own life in June 1958 and became perhaps the last of so many casualties suffered on that bloody day on Omaha Beach. Thanks for watching. We hope you found this video interesting. It was a powerful one for us to make. We want to offer a special thanks to the team at Findmypast who sponsored this video. If you'd like to learn more about your own family history in war or peace and create your own family tree for free, why not check out the link in the description. And if you enjoy content like this, be sure to take a look at our video exploring the fighting through Normandy's infamous Bocage countryside immediately after D-Day. That's all this time. We'll see you again soon.